As promised, today we're going to be diving into the video responding to things not to say to those that voted Remain. This should be exciting. Is it wrong of me to want Salty to come up as an answer?
Brexit means Brexit.
Even I, a Brexit voter, have no idea what that means, yet it has been used countless times in Parliament.
Brexit means Brexit. Brexit means Brexit. Brexit means Brexit.
Brexit means Brexit.
Brexit means Brexit.
Breakfast means breakfast.
Breakfast!
Sweat stains mean wear a darker shirt.
Brexit derived their campaign slogan from the idea of celebrity couples just putting two words together. Like Kimye.
The word Brexit has become so meaningless.
Yes, it doesn't refer to a soft Brexit or a hard Brexit.
Which is why when the vote was cast, you only had two options. There was no such thing as a soft or hard Brexit. It was simply leave the EU, which means everything, or stay. Now how David Davis negotiates this will determine what we end up with in less than 2 years' time. Rather annoyingly, this far removed from the vote and the result, we still have many people who are in fact Remoaners, still remoaning about the vote, either because they don't believe it should have gone to a vote, or they cannot accept the vote and want a second referendum.
If you lost, you're not going to be gassed, you're not going to be brap, yes.
It's a shame really, because I would have rather had that than what we saw next.
I think the problem is that people think the debate is done now. They think we've had Brexit and that's a done deal.
We're the generation that moans most because we're the generation that's getting fucked most.
Yeah.
I will agree the debate isn't done, but the result is conclusive. And as far as generations getting screwed over, you are not the generation most screwed over. You're the most entitled generation.
We don't have the guaranteed pensions that we don't have. We're not going to have the retirement age they have. We have expensive houses to buy. We don't have the free education they had.
This brings up a rather complex discussion on whether or not it is a human right to have all of what that young lady mentioned. And I'm not going to go into it because it would take far too long. Now, just to pick at one little thing, we do not have free education in the United Kingdom. There are some schools that some journalists set up that were considered or are considered free schools, but someone pays for education. It is not free. I personally am not so sure if it was a win for the ordinary person or whether it shined a huge light on Parliament being so out of touch with the majority of England.
I'm an ordinary person and I don't feel like it's necessarily a victory for me.
I feel like Britain's a country of weirdos. I don't think there's any ordinary people here.
I would assume for this to make sense, the definition of ordinary person would have to have some basic parameters. And in this instance, I would assume they are deriving it from the common English person. What that is, of course, depends on different people.
I don't understand why people are trying to make it a class issue or an educated versus uneducated issue.
Well, it's rather interesting you mention this, since it was the Remoaning camp that made all of the identitarian remarks. Ooh, those Brexit voters, not very intelligent. Ooh, those Brexit voters must be working class. Oh, and if you're Diane Abbott, ooh, those Brexit voters are racist.
What I'd really like is a politician who brings us all together, who says, you know, let's stop talking about elites, let's stop talking about ordinary people, let's start talking about Britain as a nation.
Yeah, it hinders debate for sure.
Oddly enough, the United Kingdom did in fact have a Prime Minister that was very much like that. He was very charismatic. Hell, he had his own entrance music. He was very popular with the Americans, and he loved a firework display.
Allahu Akbar!
An illegal one, but he had one nonetheless. This particular argument is one I've heard many times. In fact, I'd heard this argument long before Brexit happened, and it was mostly because people believed we were running out of space. When you consider our population, certainly there is reason to question just how much space we really have. But again, how is this something you shouldn't say to a Remain voter? Is it going to trigger them somehow?
We're full.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. We're definitely not. There's space for my mum's house if you need.
Bruv, I don't think you should be fobbing off a space at your mother's house without consulting your mother first.
We haven't invested properly in our public services, we haven't invested in our schools, in our NHS.
Unsurprisingly, there are consequences to overspending. For example, Labour's overspending in government created debt with interest rates that were so high that the interest we pay on our debt is higher than that of the total salaries for the NHS. The NHS sets their own budget. Schools do need more investment, but unfortunately there is only so much that can be invested by the government because of the amounts having to be paid in debt interest and, of course, dealing with the budget deficit. There are consequences, and unfortunately, until it is all in order, and yes, I'm very much aware that Tories are still borrowing, but until it is in order, and our books are balanced, and the economy is growing in such a way that we are able to invest, there is only so much we can do. And just an FYI, there is only so much you can get away with blaming before you have to start taking responsibility, something which a lot of politicians don't do.
Also, the NHS is run mostly by people who are immigrants. We take a lot of nurses from Spain
very true.
and Eastern Europe.
Which is very true, and also tells me that a lot of people in this country are choosing not to go into certain professions. That sounds like something from another discussion entirely, but I thought I'd raise it anyway.
We have a skills shortage across loads of different industries, and the EU is fundamentally helping us bridge that gap.
Did you know the EU also has a piece of legislation that encourages British businesses to hire in skilled employment continental workers over that of British workers? And I know this because I've been a victim of it. And I say victim because I was denied a job because a business was instead offered money to hire someone from mainland Europe over me, which, after spending 4 years unemployed, irked me ever so slightly.
Not full, there's plenty of space, geographical, physical space in this country. If things are full up, if schools are full up, if hospitals are full up, we need to build more.
Just to be a cynic for 1 second, if schools are full up, people need to procreate less. If hospitals are full up, we need to spend more money on researching cures. I just wanted to be a dick for a second. Please continue. I'll be honest, before these people answer, I am not such a big fan of this term. I'm not so big on it because it doesn't mean that we voted in a united manner and said, let's all get out of the EU before the EU turns into a massive government and starts lording it over us, giving us no power whatsoever. Instead, the vote showed that we are a massively divided society. Politicians are massively out of touch with that of the rest of the country outside of London and, let's say, Scotland, but that's not the same as London. It also showed how totally untrustworthy the media are, with the polls and the fear not helpful at all.
We've got 17.4 million people who decided for 65 million people what was going to happen.
You know, it's rather funny you should mention that, as there was a petition on the .gov website saying that because the total number of those that voted wasn't at 75% turnout, that we should have a second referendum instead. Now let's not forget here for a second how utterly stupid your comment is. Yes, 17.4 million people did in fact vote to leave, and 16 point whatever million. That is over 30 million people voting in the election. That is over 70% of those eligible to vote, leaving a huge chunk of those that were not eligible to vote. I've dumbed this down incredibly. Your comment is stupid. That's what I should have said. Your comment is stupid.
I think the nation has spoken, but I don't think the nation should have been allowed to speak in the first place.
I actually agree. It should never have gone to a referendum. But this shows what happens when people feel alienated. They protest, vote for the right rises, the politicians notice this and give the referendum because that is what they want. Because they believe the EU is what is causing our problems. Now I do agree the EU does cause a lot of problems, but I didn't think it should have had to go to the people to vote to leave. I think it had to come down to the politicians to negotiate our terms so that they were more agreeable to us. We are one of the biggest countries in it, so it would have made more sense for them to give us more powers and not have it so that our powers were constantly being given away. If you want to look to somebody to blame, by the way, for us losing powers, start with John Major and work your way to present.
I think people should be allowed to speak, but it should have been more specific, because saying we want to leave the EU is so bloody vague.
It really isn't. On the ballot, it was quite clear. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say this. And I don't see how this is something you shouldn't say to someone who voted Remain. And if they did fight at all during the campaign, it was with the wrong tactics. No joke, scaring people doesn't work. We're far too stubborn, bloody-minded.
You didn't fight hard enough.
I think we fought badly. I don't think we didn't fight hard enough.
Well, acceptance is better than nothing, I guess. Am I right to assume that those that say this to those that voted Remain say it in an attempt to trigger the Remain voters? I've still never heard this. I don't even know if this is true or not.
I love being part of the EU.
I'm proud to be British, I'm proud to be English, but I am a European.
Doesn't mean I feel European, I feel British.
Can I not be proud of my Britishness and also
value Europe?
Yeah.
We're a little bit stingy.
Very stingy.
We love an underdog. We've got a good sense of humour, we take the piss out of ourselves, and we're shit at penalties.
We also like to complain, queue up, complain about queuing up, and write letters complaining about having to queue up. Yeah, I'm not letting any of you answer this. You're not getting a second referendum, so leave it, you silly, silly Remoaners.